Do you want to hear a great story? It's about the dollhouse turned diva turned dollhouse again. It is an expensive and ongoing, well, we're not sure if it's going to be a gem or a disaster. But Michelle Correa tells us the real deal of what happens behind the scenes of real estate redevelopment. And I hope you have never had anything happen to you like this. But Michelle talks about what's happened and the lessons she's learned. She wants to share that with you. Join us on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast as we interview Michelle Correa. Hey, I am here in Colorado and I do long term and short term, and both of those things have been blowing up today. It's just always something, but we have somebody here that's got a great story. She's been a friend of Christy's for a while, Michelle Correa, and I can't wait to hear some of these stories. But first, before we get into real estate, I have to hear about the house horses. I mean, any dog that you call a house horse has got to be something. What's up with that?
So we have a house horse. Yes, he's very gigantic. I live actually on a mountain, and people almost every day when I take him for a walk, someone says, "Oh my gosh, I thought you were walking a bear." So he was an accidental breeding. The breeder breeds Newfoundlands, Old English sheepdogs, Bernese mountain dogs, and then the poodle version of each of those for people who have allergies. And somehow the Newfoundland mom and the sheepadoodle dad got together, and this created a gigantic, taller than a Great Dane, longer than me. Like, I'm 5'7", and when he stands up, he's taller than me. Hairy, gorgeous, gentle giant.
Wow. Well, I've had huskies, but never had dogs that were mistaken for a bear. Although mine have
Yep.
been mistaken for wolves. Not the same. I've been around real wolves in my photographic past. The photographer I was working with actually rented real wolves from wolf handlers for a photo shoot.
Oh, wow.
That's a true story. But now, in your background, it sounds like you worked with your family's photography business. And I came from a career in
Yes.
photography. What kind of photography did you all do?
So I worked with them for 37 years, started as a teenager, and it started back in the day with the 1 hour photo finishing machine where you'd watch the pictures, go up the printed pictures, the film pictures go up the side there, and expanded into anything to do with photography. So had camera stores, scrapbooking section, custom framing, enlarging pictures, putting pictures onto mugs and all kinds of things. And then school and sports photography, also portrait studio, video transfers, like anything to do with a photo. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wow. That is a lot. And one of the things that I've talked to other people about, because I've met some other photographers who have filed patents and so on. I ran into that while I was filing a patent. And one of the things it's a theory that I have, and this will lead us into our discussion, is that in photography, especially location photography, it's constant problem solving. You get there and you don't really know you think you know what's going to happen. And then you get there and that's not what happens.
Exactly.
And you have got to figure it out, because at the end of the day, as I've talked to people, is that I have to deliver. That's the difference between a hobbyist and a professional, is that a hobbyist can say, I'm not feeling it today. The weather's not right. The model's not working, whatever it is. But as a professional, like, they're paying me and I have to deliver by the end of the day. And so the pressure is on to always produce.
100%.
And it sounds like you took that can do and you went like big time into real estate. And we don't usually have the 22 doors in 22 months, but you did 22 doors in less than 12 months. You just really went bonkers. Tell us how you got started and why. Why real estate from photography?
So yeah, that's a big jump, isn't it? So I broke my leg. That's what started all this. I slipped on a stair and my body didn't slip, and now I'm bionic. I have metal rod in my leg and plates and screws. So I had a lot of time on the couch to just kind of think about life, and I'm getting closer to retirement, not super close, but getting there. And I just wanted to have something of my own. And in retirement, I plan on traveling a lot and bringing grandkids and just living a big life. And we were heading that way because, we were doing quite well, but I knew there was more and I wanted to do something on my own. And I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when the book first came out, and thought it was really, really cool. And then I also have basically I call him my son. He was an exchange student that came to live with us 7 years ago. He was supposed to live with us for 6 months and he never left our family. So he calls us mom and
Wow.
dad, and he's still with us. And he was one of the top trainers for Rich Dad Poor Dad for many, many years. And so he would always say, Auntie, you have to invest in real estate. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I will get to it. I put it in my to-do pile. Busy mom, working full time, kids involved in everything. Has been traveling a lot. So just never quite got to it. And I'm kind of, as you'll probably quickly discover, sort of a type A perfectionist personality. So I wanted to do it right. And I wanted to learn how to do it. And I just never had the time. And he, kind of remind me every once in a while, yeah, Tim, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And so then when I was sitting on the couch just thinking, I'm like, you know what? It's time. And he had started his own educational company. And so I called him up and I said, I'm ready. And he told me the price. And I was like, how much? I said, isn't there like a mama discount? And he's like, no mama discount, because then you won't take it seriously, which is, true. Like, I don't know how many people have bought, $200, $500,000 courses and they never even open them. Right. So
Yep.
if you're making that investment in yourself, you're going to take it seriously. So I took it very seriously right away and jumped right in, because being that kind of perfectionist, I knew that if I didn't jump in 2 years later, I'd still be analyzing the same property. And I learned by doing. And so I knew that was the best way for me to jump right in, and partnered with people in the community. And here I am.
That's awesome. So what did you start with? What was your initial investment? How'd you get the wheels under you?
So my first investment was a duplex in Calgary, and it didn't have a legal suite. So we legalized the suite and made it beautiful, and then renovated the upstairs and downstairs and rented it out to tenants. And I've done more deals with that first partner. We become family, basically, friends that are like family. And the next one was also a duplex. And then I went into a sixplex, and then a fourplex, and just kept kind of adding these 3, 4, 5, sixplexes into my portfolio.
So what was the catalyst or the trigger to say, hey, it's a duplex that I'm going after, and what was it about that first property?
Hey, can we talk business for a second? If you've been flipping houses or running short-term rentals, you already know how to hustle. You know how to spot opportunity, add value, and make a property work harder. But if we're being honest, flipping gets exhausting, and short-term rentals are definitely not passive. So what's next? For a lot of people I work with, the answer is real estate development. I'm talking about turning a vacant lot into a quadplex, or bringing a rundown building back to life as a mixed-use space. I'm Christy Candle, and I've been a real estate developer my entire career, and now I host the Local Real Estate Developer podcast to help locals like you do the same. We pull back the curtain and show you what it takes to go from flipper or host to local developer. If you're ready to build something bigger, this podcast is for you. Check out the Local Real Estate Developer podcast on all platforms.
It was basically the first one that was almost put in front of me, for one thing. And I wanted to start a little bit smaller before I jumped, right? You want to learn to walk before you run. And I knew that multifamily was kind of where I wanted to start, because I was looking for that long-term kind of empire for my daughters. I have 3 adult daughters that I'm building this for. And I wasn't necessarily after that immediate cash flow that a lot of people are after when they start real estate investing. I had already retired from my job, so I didn't have a job to escape from. And so I was wanting more that long-term view. So that's why I started there.
And then
All right, makes sense.
Did you guys pay for that in cash, or did you get a loan on that? Just because I believe Canada does loan structuring differently than we have in the US.
Yeah, I've discovered that as I'm trying to invest in the States. So I live in Vancouver. So houses appreciate a lot. And so we had built our house at the time 10 years prior to that. So we had a lot of equity in our home. And so that's what we leveraged at the start to start investing. And all my first deals were JV deals. So I was the capital partner, and I partnered with people who were the managing partner, because that way I could learn alongside them. And then once, obviously everyone runs out of money at some point. And then I became the managing partner, and now I do both managing and capital, as you sell things and you refinance and things come in and out. So, but that's how I started. Yeah. It was with my home equity.
Nice. All right. So you started out small, and you're getting rolling, and you came across a property that I've heard you call the Dollhouse. Tell us about the Dollhouse.
The Dollhouse, yes. So she is the gift that keeps on giving. She is the story that I get to tell all the time, and people just shake their heads like, I don't even know what to say. So One rule I have learned is not to fall in love with the property. So I fell in love with the dollhouse when I first saw her. She's a gorgeous, she looks like an old Victorian home. She was not a heritage home, thank goodness. So I thought, oh, I'm good because she's not a heritage home. But she was this big, beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous house, blue and white trim. I could just, listen to the walls when a big family lived there, way back in the late 1800s. So she was built in the late 1800s and she had been severely neglected. I call her a she, you can tell. That's what I am
That's
in this
fine.
property. So she had been badly neglected, and it actually made me really sad, the condition that the tenants were living in the unit. So it was a 5 unit at the time, and just horrible, horrible conditions. So I don't know if I was naive when I was first kind of starting, but I was like, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to fix it and make everything better for everybody, right? So I did all the inspections and all the kind of stuff that you're supposed to do. And we purchased the property and we started renovating each unit. It took us about 18 months to get it all done. And we renovated them so they're all, beautiful, safe spaces, and did all the correct things. And that was one of the problems we had, was the contractor with that one. So we started out really friendly, and he was like, had our back, and he was our, best friend type thing. Did a great job at the beginning. And by the end, he was way overcharging, was not finishing the jobs properly, had too many other things on the go. And I heard from my realtor, she's like, there's a crackhead working at your property. And I'm like, pardon? So, yeah, but we ended up getting it to the end and refinanced it. And so we had taken it from $1,000 property to, it was valued at 1.2 million by the time we were done. So we added another unit, made it a 6-unit, because one of the units was 3,000 square feet. So that was plenty to divide it into two.
How many square feet was this building?
This building is, I think it's about 12,000 square feet. It's quite a large building. So it has like the main house, which would have been the main house way back when. And then perpendicular to it, it has a carriage house, which back in the day would have been for the horses. And it's overlooking the water in New Brunswick. And I think I've tried to do the research of who owned this house. And I think it was probably a shipbuilder or a ship captain. So he had, the view of the water, and he had this big grand house. And so yeah, it was a big house.
Okay, so big house, and you're doing the renovations. Roughly how much did you put into the renovations on this?
We probably put about $500,000 into the renovations by the time we were done. So we made good money. We pulled out all of our initial investment into it. So it was, the perfect burr. We pulled out some extra cash, and it was cash flowing about $1,000 a month. So we thought, oh, this is great. We're really good. And then we got kind of the first inkling that things were not going to go well was we got a call from the police, from the property manager, who had shown up at the house because there was a drug party going on. And they thought that someone who had set off some guns was in our property. And it turns out they weren't, but the tenant in this brand new unit had done a ton of damage in like 3 weeks. So they had like scratched all the new flooring. They put dents in the walls. We had to eventually evict them, and they ended up stealing the brand new microwave, all this window screens. Like, why do you want window screens? All the smoke detectors. Like, it was just, so anyways. And then the whole story starts when the tenant upstairs of the carriage house called the property manager and said, there's some water in my kitchen. So we thought, oh, that's weird. Like, why is there water? And so we started investigating and figured it was coming from outside somewhere. So we started pulling off the siding of the house.
Yeah, to be clear, the water in the kitchen is not in the sink, right? It's
no, it's on the floor.
It's where it's not supposed to be.
Exactly.
I feel that pain very real. In fact, I got a text not 1,000 years ago. In fact, the ink is still wet on the text that I've got water under a sink at one of my properties right now, and it's not supposed to be outside the pipes. That's the problem.
It's not supposed to be. So this was on the brand new hardwood floor. So
okay, take us away.
Yeah. So the contractor started pulling it's wood siding on this house because it's an old house, and pulling it apart. And so this is in the carriage house on the top floor, and he's like seeing all this damage inside and he's going further and further down, and he got all the way down to the bottom of the lower floor, and he's like, I don't even know what to tell you. Luckily, I had a trip planned out there because it's like a whole day to get to this place. And so I was there the next day, and still think there's a day. So basically someone in their wisdom had decided to make this a carriage house into 2 units, and they put like literally this much cement, maybe this high, on grass. They didn't even dig a
So
foundation.
she's just, if you're not watching, you're listening. She's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of shaping
I guess
about
it's,
like 2 inches by 8 inches or so here. This is not.
yes, this
She's
is not a
not
big
waving her
foundation.
arms really wide like a
Like a true footer or foundation or anything should be.
right.
No.
Right.
And then on top of that little piece of cement that went all around on the grass, they had stood vertically 2x4s to hold up an entire 2-story structure with a metal roof, mind you, on top of it, right? So it's not light. And there was literally, I think it was 3 or 4 of these 2x4s that were still actually supporting the whole entire building. Like the rest of them were either not attached, or you would touch them and they would just kind of go in. And I was shocked. I didn't know how this building was standing. And the corner beam, my contractor put his fingers into it and it just like crumbled. It was just, I didn't know whether to throw up or cry or scream. I stood there dumbfounded because I was just like, how has this happened? Like, I was just shocked.
So this is on the carriage house after you've done the renovations, and you've got 2 units in this. I'm assuming tenants living in them because one of them reported a water leak.
Yeah. So we thought, well, we have to get the tenants out of there because it's not safe for them to be in there. And so we sent them a notice, explaining what was happening and that they had to leave, and they didn't want to leave. So they went to the tribunal and said, they're just trying to make us leave because they want to renovate the places and get more rent. And I'm like, they're completely like, what are you talking about? And just walk outside your unit and you can see that there's nothing holding this building up. So it actually took us 2 months to get them out because the tribunal was like, oh, well, they can stay and, da, da, da. And so finally my property manager send them a letter saying, you've been notified of this. If something happens to them while they're in there, we are no longer responsible. It's your responsibility. And so then they finally took some action and had them, and removed from the property because we couldn't do anything to fix it until they were out of the property. So it was kind of mind-boggling. Obviously, I guess we had fixed it up nice enough they didn't want to leave, but it was mind-boggling that they wanted to stay in something that was clearly not safe for them to be in.
So how does that work in your market when they have to leave as you do renovations? They just move on?
Typically, it depends which province you're in Canada. So sometimes, some of the provinces, they have to come back in at the exact same rent. So a lot of landlords don't renovate because why would you go put a whole bunch of money into a property and rent it for the same amount that you were renting it for before? And that's the case in the province that I live in. In this one, they don't have to come back, and it was going to be a long time. It's been a long time, so they couldn't have come back. But they were just able to go find another place, and our property manager helped them find another place to live. So.
And this is important. If you're an investor, is you have to find out what the laws are where you are. And that might be renters' rights in a specific town. Because where I am, for example, the community in Greeley has a different set of renters' rights than one just in another county right across the way. And the state has different things. Now, what's happened in our state here in Colorado recently is if that happened to me, I have to pay to move my tenants. I have to pay their new rent. If they're farther away from work, I have to pay for their commute to work. I have to buy them a refrigerator. So basically, it's going to put landlords out of business. Is what's going to happen.
It sounds like you're in California, but you're not.
Yeah.
It's worse. We've tried to be California, and California said that was a bad idea. We're not doing that. And Colorado's like, well, yeah, hold my beer. Watch us. And so this is really important because it is likely going to drive me out of Colorado because we had a kitchen that 100%. Went bad. Okay, so a kitchen went bad and it leaked under the sink. They didn't tell me for I don't know how long. Water was pouring into the shop where one of my tenants is working, and they didn't tell me until it had molded the inside of the shop, the inside of the kitchen, destroyed the entire sink base. And it's like, oh, there's a little water problem. Well, by that time, it was a problem. And so I called my contractor that I normally work with and said, hey, what can you do? He says, nothing for 6 weeks. Well, you can't leave a moldy kitchen in there. And so I've spent a good portion of a week tearing out an entire kitchen all the way through the studs, doing mitigation on this stuff and reinstalling because I can't afford to move all my tenants into hotels, pay them for commuting, and so on. And it's making it, this is just a thing you've got to watch for wherever you are, is can you afford to even do the business? If you want to, and I'm losing money. I've lost about, at this point, and they texted me yesterday with more stuff. I've lost about 4 years worth of rent at this point on that house. And so either I'm going to suck it up and just wait 4 years for it to level out again, or I'm just going to have to sell the property. And this is a challenge that landlords face. Now, fortunately, my 2x4s were not that wet and they were sitting on a good footer. So take us to what in the world happens. Okay, so they finally do move out. You're facing this, basically, you've got, I'm trying to picture this thing, a 2-story building standing on what sounds like less than bricks, propped up by rotten 2x4s, and you've got a renovated house inside of this whole shell. What in the
Attached
world?
to a renovated house.
Attached to a better house. I am co-host of this podcast because education is my calling. That's also why I developed a course on short-term rentals. It's called STR in an Hour, and it's perfect for busy professionals. It's a lot of content packed into 1 hour. No fluff, no upsell. It's an overview of STRs from A to Z. Everything from how to choose a property to how to estimate income and expenses. It's literally the best and most content I could pack into 59 minutes. With over 4,000 nightly stays in my own STRs, I've learned important lessons, and I want to share them with you. Link with more information in the show notes. Yeah. Okay. So you got one domino just perilously tipping over against another one. You don't want to lose them both. What did you do?
So, like I said, the carriage house is perpendicular to the main house. So you could see it starting to separate in the corner. And I think probably what was actually holding up this unit was the upper unit had a back deck that we had resecured in the renovations. And I think that was probably holding the house in. So if we hadn't, if we had removed that deck, I don't know what would have happened. So I had a really good engineer that I was actually working on another project not far away from there that was a 55 unit development project. So, and he's a structural engineer. So I brought him in and, just to kind of evaluate and look at everything. And so we have what's called a CMHC mortgage on that. So that's kind of like probably your Fannie Freddie mortgages. So it's a government insured mortgage. So they're very strict here as to what you can and can't do once you have this mortgage. So we were looking at potentially taking out the bottom unit and jacking up the building, and then digging down a deep foundation, adding another unit, fixing this unit, fixing the top unit. We'd have a now 7-unit building, and go from there. However, once we started, just dealing with the city and just everything that they were requiring us to do, and because it was now considered a new build, we had to put in an accessible unit and a whole bunch of other requirements. So it just made it like this project ballooned into like $650,000. And that was just kind of not even doing anything very fancy. And I'm like, we just cannot put that much more money into this building in the location that it's in. Like, we would never get it back out. So then we went back to square two and decided not to put the lower, like a basement unit in. So digging the foundation, we still had to take that unit out. We found a different way to prop up the building. So initially we were I call them a jacker lifter upper. I don't know what their actual title is, but they were going to bring in like
jacker lifter upper. I love that. Every time a house gets elevated here in Southwest Florida, I'm going to say that's a jacker lifter upper.
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't lift the whole house because it was perpendicular to each other, right? And it just was too big of a property for them to do that. So they were going to come in with all the metal and all this stuff to do it, but the sitting part of it with all their equipment in it was going to be so expensive. So I have a contractor who's a new contractor from the other one that took us for a ride, but he's just very, very he's very smart and figures things out. So he was able to build his own support beams out of wood and metal and things. And so we knocked out the unit we had renovated, and he was able to support up the upper unit. And then with that, we decided, we're going to start digging the foundation. So because these were built so long ago, our building is right on the property line, and the neighbor's building is also right on the property line. So we were going to have to go in through his backyard to dig the foundation. So then we started talking to the tenants next door, and they're like, do not touch his property. He sues everybody. So they had electrical work done, and he sued the electrician. They had plumbing work done, and he sued the plumber. So we're like, okay, even if we put it back to exactly how it was, he was going to find something. So we thought we got to figure out another way. So again, very, very good contractor. And he got his little bobcat thingy in there, and he was digging a lot of it with that. And then they ended up having to dig a lot of it by hand and get out the debris that had fallen underneath this building. And that was another thing I discovered the previous contractor probably had seen this damage because there was a false floating floor on top of the floor that had been there that you could see down below. And they had also dumped a whole bunch of construction debris down there and boulders and then just covered it up and leveled it out. So fairly confident that he had seen all this and just didn't say anything and covered it up, right? So a lot of it was dug by hand. And we had the insulation in garbage bags on our driveway, which is the garbage bag was kind of touching his house. And he threatened to sue us and bring a structural engineer because we were damaging his structure with insulation.
Wow.
It's been fun. And then go ahead. Yeah.
So where are you now in the process?
Well,
So now,
and real quick,
yeah.
what's the year time? What's the time frame from you bought it? It was bought it to stabilize to now through this whole mess that is working out.
So bought it in 2021. Yeah, bought it in 2021. Took about 18 months to renovate it. 6 months later, found out hey, this is not going so well as we thought.
So 18 months in, you're like, great, refinance, got tenants. This is a great property, tons of equity.
Exactly,
Cool.
it's so beautiful.
6 months after.
Yeah, actually, we had started calling her the Diva because, we had fixed her up so nicely and we thought, oh, she's the diva now, right? But then she started acting like a diva. So she's now been demoted to the dollhouse again. So, and then that whole process, we just were able to get going this spring. So it was almost 2 years in between when this all started and now, and we're still fighting with the insurance company for our rent coverage.
We said, my question too. You had home insurance. This was a unforeseen condition that was already there before. Did they cover any part of this, or how did they go about denying it? Because I believe your spouse knows insurance too. So
he does.
If you were going to win, you would have the right people on your team.
Exactly. So they, I guess, of course, freaked out because they're thinking we're going after the whole foundation and everything. I'm like, yeah, it'd be wonderful if you covered that, but this is a pre-existing condition, and I know you're not going to cover that. But we were going after just the rent for 12 months because that's what we had coverage for, right? And it's been a lot of back and forth and back and forth. It's gone all the way to London now to be adjudicated and stuff. So, that's a whole another story. I don't know if we'll ever get any money out of that. But we're feeding money into this property every month now because we only had 4 units being rented, right? And not the 6. Thankfully, I have an amazing JV partner. Shout out to Rondi because she's been, fabulous through this and just in there with me. And where she's like, we're going to fix this. We're going to figure it out. So it's really important. It's a good lesson as to who you partner with is super, super important. Yeah. So I can't remember what your question was now.
So as you've got this carriage house that's loosely, as it turns out, attached to your main house.
Yeah.
Did you consider just simply doing a demo and saying, "Yep, now it's only 4 units"? And how did you decide to go from not doing the demo to saying, "Okay, we're going to try to save this"?
Yeah. So, but one of our first thoughts was we would just knock it down and rebuild on the property. However, because it's the buildings are perpendicular to each other, there's this big metal roof that goes over the whole building. It was all attached. And then also all the plumbing and wiring and electrical was all in and attached and throughout. So it was going to be so expensive to demolish it that it just didn't make sense to go that way. So that kind of quickly put that out of the mind. And then I also thought we just tear this whole thing down, and because it is zoned for some medium density, so we could have put something up there. However, the area that it's in, it's just not ready for that yet. There's nothing going on there, and we're one of the few lots that is zoned for that. So in the future, there is potential. However, we had put so much money into this and have a huge mortgage on it, and I thought this is just not going to be feasible for us to knock it all down.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So in the process of this, you had to learn a lot of things, a lot of lessons that are applicable to other things. In fact, I saw you say something about challenges are actually educational opportunities. So can you share with us and our listeners, what are some of the key things that you have learned about or along on this journey?
Oh my goodness, so many lessons in this property. Yeah, my education expenses, I call them. I think,
and we all have them.
Oh yeah. Well, and if you say you don't, you're lying because, you see real estate investors and they're like, oh, everything's always perfect and it's all passive and la, 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 it's la, la land. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And if they're saying that, run away because they're not telling you the truth, right? So I think the biggest thing is just to be flexible and be able to embrace the challenges and being able to pivot. Because if you have that plan in mind and it doesn't always go according to plan. I probably did about 6 months ago, I did a big reframe on this project because my contractor kept coming to me with more problems. We ended up having to take the whole big garage out because that's a whole more story. I don't know how long you have, but so I did a big reframe and I said, I was like, oh, why is this happening to me? How come? How do people build like this? How did they let this happen? I want to sue the city, rah, rah, rah. And then I said, you know what? Thank goodness we found out about this, because if this had collapsed while I owned it and if tenants had got hurt, like, I don't know how I would live with myself, right? So I stopped and reframed it and said, thank God this happened. And I found out about it before it was too late. And that I have the opportunity to fix it and learn from it and help others learn from this also. So that was probably one of the big lessons. And there's been many, many more. Thoroughly vet your contractors, not just what, because they say things and that's not necessarily what they do. And I didn't want to be a bother and have, a detailed scope of work. We had a fairly decent one. He gave me like one paragraph at first and we had a couple page one, but you really need to be very, very thorough. And if they can't even get that done, that's a good, how are they going to do the work? Like, what is their attention to detail if they don't have a system in place to give you a thorough scope of work, right? So
that is absolutely 100% the builders who, if you want to read the story, it's how to lose $500,000 on one door. Although you might be coming up on me here on this one. But
oh, yeah.
My builders, they kept submitting literally the wrong floor plans to the city. And it wasn't even for my lot. And after the first time, I should have been nervous. And after the second time, I should have fired them instantly. I didn't, and it cost me dearly. But yeah, if they can't handle this level of detail, the level of detail you expect to go into a building isn't going to happen. It just isn't. And you may have heard of the story of, was it Van Halen? I think it was, put a clause in their concert contract for the venues that they had to provide green M&Ms in their green room. Okay. And I thought for years that was because they were just finicky, they're rock stars, they could do whatever they want to. But actually it turned out that their show was extremely technical and they had a very detailed, if you will, scope of work of what they needed to have done at the concert venue. And so they put that in there as an Easter egg, knowing that if nobody read the contract saying this is what we need for our electricity and for our audio and for all these other things, if they didn't read the contract for those things, they would also not find the green M thing. But if they found it and they said, oh, what's up with the green M&Ms? They would know our contractors here now are paying attention to the details. And if a builder cannot provide you a scope of work with a budget to go along with this, they are absolutely winging the paperwork, which only gets worse when they start to wing your construction.
Exactly. And we discovered that for sure. And I now I don't assume things anymore. I used to assume, well, obviously that's common sense, but common sense is not a common gene.
It's not common.
And I don't assume anymore. And I'm very detailed and very specific as to what my expectations are now. And, not unrealistic and not unreasonable. Mm-hmm. However, these are the expectations and, we can work together if we can both follow these expectations. And if not, I wish you the best, but I need to work with someone on the team who can.
Right. And we've had a couple contractors on that have said just that. They're like, no. Like, we want it to be, the good ones want it to be detailed. They want to be dialed. They want to know exactly what you want because they don't want to be coming back either. And that does mean that maybe you pause and you take some more time, but we have all had these lessons learned that we go, crap, because of that. Now our checklists and our details and our scope are so much more.
Mm-hmm.
That's because of hard lessons. That's the education we paid for.
Education expenses. Yes. I've got a lot of those.
It's interesting how so much of the success of renovations, projects, and many things in life it's the prep work. And I learned this as a photographer. I had a number of friends who are just outstanding wildlife photographers. And one guy, he specializes in sandhill cranes. His name is Mike. I'm sure he doesn't listen to this, but he said, I went with him one time and we spent the better portion of the day before we went out preparing, lining out our gear, lining out the plan, lining out all of the things. And he had this amazing blind and all this other stuff. And I was like, man, but your shoot's tomorrow. And he said, yeah, but success tomorrow depends on preparation today. And so this goes to a lot of what we're talking about is it's finding the right contractor, vetting the contractor, getting good scope of work. You mentioned inspections, really going here. We've interviewed enough people now that I don't think I could ever buy a property without doing a survey. Like it's just
you better
so
not.
important. Yeah, I know, right? But what we want to do is we want to get the saw out, we want to get the hammer out, we want to see the shovel in the ground, right? Because you can see that happening. But what we hear as a consistent theme of those who are trying to share their lessons with others is that a lot of the work is done before it looks like the work is happening. Exactly. And you have to have patience to do all of this stuff because that's where the success goes. And also saying no, simply just saying no, that you'll say no to a lot of things. We've talked about buy boxes, and the tighter you have that buy boxes, the more often you say no. That leads to success. What other things have you learned that you'd want to share to say, this is a thing I'd want to pass forward?
I think, we mentioned before, don't get emotionally involved because my partner and I, we say she's lucky she's beautiful because otherwise I don't know if we'd still be here. But, not getting emotionally attached and really, really finding the right power team members. So I did have an inspection done and I asked about the structure and I asked about, do I need a structural engineer in there? And he's like, oh, no, it's fine. It's because the main part of the house is on like gigantic boulders. Like it's not going anywhere for a very long time because a lot of this city is built on rock, right? And however, because the building is so big and it's in and out, he probably didn't even realize when you're down there that he hadn't seen underneath the carriage house at all, right? It wouldn't even a thing. So, I think back now, I don't know if a structural engineer would have seen this because it was all behind the walls and covered and stuff, but I don't know if maybe he would have seen something that might have alluded to it. I mean, hindsight is 50-50, right? You never
I think potentially just like on our deals where we know we're going to do significant work, we'll do where they will dig out a portion of the foundation in different spots to where they'll actually go down, and then in theory they should catch that. But you're right. Regardless, you can't catch you can have the biggest due diligence checklist, but you will have unforeseen conditions and things come up. And like you said, it's your ability to pivot, reframe, and just figure out, okay, what is the next best step forward, and just start going. And as you get new information, pivot and go from there.
Exactly.
There's risk in anything we do in life. There's risk in investing. There's risk in business. And it's just going, okay, something's going to happen and I'm going to roll with the punches.
That's right. I like that Marie Forleo quote. Everything is figure outable. That's kind of that quote and Henry Ford. If you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Those are my two guiding things that lead me. And I just figure it out, and I'm persistent. Some people may call it stubborn, but I'm going to figure it out.
I like to quote the great Kelly Clarkson and say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's right. Yes.
So you mentioned Marie Forleo and everything is figure outable. Outstanding stuff. She's a great listen if you find her on podcasts and so on. Important stuff. So where do you go for that mindset reboot to stay focused on this? Because the beat downs can be relentless. You get one call, it's like, oh, we got to do this. And you think, well, all we got to do is we got to get through the, I think you used a different phrase for city council. What was that? The commission or whatever.
For the tenants, it's the tribunal, they call it.
The tribunal, okay. So you're thinking like, okay, we'll get through the tribunal and then we're good to go. You finally get through the tribunal and you're like, awesome. All we got to do is drive through this neighbor's yard and get access. And you're finding out that's not happening either. And so things keep happening. How do you keep your mindset in a good space?
Yeah, well, even more happened after all that stuff.
And it always does.
It does, and sometimes, some weeks it's like, oh, this is the funnest thing ever. And this is great. And everything's going smoothly. And I've met wonderful people and I've got these great projects. And then the next week you feel like you're on a roller coaster upside down, just hanging on for dear life. It's like, what else can the world throw at me? Right.
I'm laughing so hard because it's so true.
I know. I don't know if you ever read that book. I think it's Darren Hardy, The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster or Roller.
Oh, that is Darren Hardy. Yeah. Yeah.
Great book. So I listen to a lot of Audible books, a lot of business Audible books and positive mindset Audible books. The Trust Your Talent community, that's where I got my real estate education from. The community there is a huge, 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 huge support. both in all the teachers, the mentors, the coaches, and then the students and community itself. So it's a very much a community that people that are not, that win-win positive mindset growth quickly weed themselves out of because they just don't fit, right? Mm-hmm. And so pretty much everybody in that community has that same mindset, which is huge, right? And so there's a lot of support with your mentors and your, the coaches and the trainers and that kind of stuff. And then just the students also, like we have a ton of different group chats on the different strategies, and we will say, hey, this came up, have you run into this? What do you do? Do you have a contractor in this city? That kind of thing. So it's been super, super valuable. And then the other thing I also from my mindset that's been super valuable is about 3 or 4 years ago, I took some seminars from PSI, Personal Success Institute or something like that. So they're the longest running personal development program in North America. And wow. It was been really, really valuable. So a lot of kind of what your stumbling blocks are, what your roadblocks are, and that kind of stuff, and mindset. And a lot of it's stuff that you were programmed before you were 4 to, mm-hmm. think about the world, think about money, think about business, like money is evil, all these kinds of things,
the
right?
root of all evil.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's been breaking through a lot of those things. And that community is also very similar to the Trust Your Talent community. And then again, joining other communities, I've joined the Strive in the US, which is all the women investors. And I just love surrounding myself with people like Christy and now you, Eric, now we've met, that are, doing good things in the world and wanting to do the right things and win-win. And when you surround yourself with people like that, you'll always figure it out. Like there's always a way to get to where you need to go. And then sometimes I just go in the forest and scream.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to yell it out. Have that. I just heard in Chicago, I saw something where they have a 7 p.m. scream meetup, and everyone gets there, and they're by Navy Pier, and they just go, wah! And then of course they bond over that. But yeah, you said so many times in there, it's about community. It's having that community.
It's community
around you that you can go to. Guys, we don't get through life alone. We do
not.
This
is not a solo sport.
It's not.
Definitely not a solo sport. Yeah.
So related to that, you have a little bit of support and you add value to the community as well through what you do. What do you do besides being our guest, which thank you very much for that. But
thank you for
what else?
Me.
Yeah. Well, what do you do as an individual to interact with the real estate investing community to add value and opportunity?
I'm very open about sharing my wins and my losses because I think that helps everybody learn, right? And I had the opportunity to learn from my mentors and, not make the mistakes they made, because everyone's going to make their own mistakes, because it's impossible to learn everything there is about real estate because every single project will teach you something new. And so just by sharing that, I have a small newsletter that I write once a month and just kind of share what we're up to and that kind of thing. And then within the communities, just being very open and honest about what I'm experiencing and, asking for help when I need it, offering lots of support and help with the experience that I've had, and just sharing what I can.
So where do people find you?
They can find me at Correa Equity Partners on my website, and it's Correa. And the same thing on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and then Michelle Correa, Michelle with 1 L, ELE, on LinkedIn. And yeah, that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Well, you have shared so much with us and with our listeners. Thank you so much for being our guest. I will have a hard time forgetting the Dollhouse, and hopefully I don't forget the lessons that you've shared with it. And it's an ongoing, unfolding story. It is not done yet.
Thank
you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast, where we tell the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. If you like this, please share this with a friend. Leave us a review, and you can pay it forward in that way. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Bye.